Welcome back. So what we're doing on this first segment is taking a walk down memory lane while also keeping an eye on the future, particularly with a view to looking at efforts for reconstruction and to scooping gains that are possible, particularly with the investments that have been made in those sectors. So we're looking at governance, accountability, global partnerships with international organizations. So joining us this morning on the show to look at 2024 and projections for 2025 is Mr. Edem Edem. He's a founder, Green Code National Coordinator, Head Green Code Mentoring Hub, CSO Observer Representative for Africa and Middle East for Climate Investment Fund of the World Bank in Washington, D.C. Mr. Edem joins us virtually from the United States. And he's not alone. We also have Dr. Tokunbo Olorundami, a lecturer at the School of Humanities, York St. John's University, United Kingdom, and public affairs analyst. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Edem, I'm going to start with you. If there were any discernible achievements in 2024, it would be in the area of refineries taking off operations. And we celebrated the Dangote refinery sometime in the middle of the year. There was also the Port Harcourt refinery taking off a few months ago. And 1 month after that, we also celebrated the Warri refinery recommencing operations after 20 years. But in spite of that, if we looked at the energy space, what would be the clear policy direction in the area of, transiting from fossil fuels into cleaner energy? We could talk about CNG, and even in the electricity sector, are there any indications about Nigeria's policy direction in moving from, fossil fuels to cleaner energy?
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity. Actually, as a Nigerian, we celebrate the refineries coming live, starting with the Dangote refinery, Port Harcourt, and then recently the Warri refinery. But also looking at the country, there is what we call energy transition plan, which the country has developed, which is also aimed at reducing carbon emission, looking at cleaner energy. And then with the introduction by the current government, bringing on board the CNG, which is also is a welcome development in the face of this ever-increasing cost of petroleum in Nigeria, which has also affected every other part of the economy, because in Nigeria, virtually we depend on petroleum for everything. We depend on petroleum for our own electricity. The public water supply is not forthcoming, especially in most parts of the cities and in the latter part of the country. So Nigerians depend on petrol to generate their own electricity, to power their businesses, be it small business and medium or large scale businesses, as well as even food processing. So the introduction of the CNG is also a welcome development. Then the formulation of energy transition policy or plan for Nigeria is also a welcome development. But looking at the finances that will be involved in this, it will also be a talk for another day. We can look at financing the energy transition plan for Nigeria, how realistic that will be. But again, there's also more that can be done when we look at providing fossil fuel and then driving the process from fossil fuel to clean technology, clean energy technology, okay? But all this will need finances, okay?
All right, let's take it to Dr. Olorundami. The same question I'd like you to respond to, but perhaps you'd also want to talk about continuity in governance, because the twilight of the last administration, there had been some partnerships that the former vice president signed in the area of investment in energy, but we haven't seen deliberate follow-up on that. Perhaps you also want to talk about that and how that can be revived in the future in terms of transiting from fossil fuels to cleaner energy.
Thank you very much, and Happy New Year to all Nigerians and all of you in the studio, and for the great work you're doing informing Nigerians. I will want to very quickly agree with Adam on the energy transition agenda, not just for Nigeria and Africa, but it's a global trend now. We now know that the use of fossil fuel is now taking a very disastrous and existential threat to our doorfronts as humanities, as human beings, on this planet. And we do know that we are pushing the planetary boundaries, very drastically, very quickly, to a stage where it becomes a case of all of us, suffering at once for it. I agree very strongly with Adam's notion on energy transition. I will want to add very, very strongly and quickly that it's not just about transiting, it's about transformation. In many scholarly publications today, advocacy is not just for energy transition, but for energy transformation. And I will explain this very quickly. It mainly deals with having our attitude transformed, having our infrastructure transformed, and having a sense of sustainability, a sense of order, a sense of using, negotiating, doing business, and using the earth's resources, with a transformed attitude. So my advocacy, in addition to what Adam has mentioned, with energy transition, is that government needs to pay more attention to the transformative edge of the transition. Otherwise, you continue to see people displaying suspicion, and as we have seen with the new transport system using a new type of gas that is less less disastrous to the environment. But to talk about continuity, I think it's a system that we have come to accept as norm, where a new president, governor, local government chairman comes in and just takes on new project, takes on new agenda, and start doing new things, not minding too much what's been done before. This borders on strengthening our institutions, where no matter who comes into place, where institutional frameworks and structures and infrastructure and personnel are well established, no matter who comes, they can tell you, this is where the driver before you stopped, this is where we need to take things. So it's not in the nearest future that we need to activate all the agreements that has been signed before President Tinubu. It is today. That gives us a sense of continuum as to how to drive not just economic activities, but energy transition agreement, climate, sustainability frameworks that we need to sign on to and continue to pursue as a country.
All right, let me take this to Adam and just talk about some of the things we've seen so far in 2025, because it's important to just measure, juxtapose. Have we learned from some of the things we experienced in 2024? Are we trying to fix them? And I'll mention two instances. First, the president released a statement that's a New Year message to Nigerians, and he talked about starting the National Credit Guarantee Company, which he talked about, to essentially help Nigerians be able to afford, simple things of life. But he also talked about things like citizens' moral rectitude and faith in our country. He talked about trying to fix them. So to that extent, he said that there will be a national identity project, there'll be a national values charter. He also talked about the youth confab, which he says that will take place in the first quarter of the year. But it would look like, to a large extent, this government is beaming the spotlight on the citizens, because if you talk about the National Identity Project, the National Values Charter, trying to fix how Nigerians see and approach their country. A lot of people will say that, no, the change should not begin with me, it should begin with you in government. But how do you see this playing into some of the challenges we saw in 2024 and fixing them for 2025, if you catch my drift?
All right, thank you very much. For me, and I think as a layman and a citizen of Nigeria, we look up to those people in government, those in the corridors of power. We look up to them and we expect much from them. We expect them to lead by example. What do I mean? Now, we have been complaining about the cost of governance, okay? And Nigerians have been also complaining about the cost of living. Food is very expensive. The inflation rate, as we speak, has hit all-time high of 34%, which has not happened in the last 30 years. So now, if the cost of living is very high, and coupled with inflation and the devaluation of the naira, and then the government is not living by example, they are not leading by example, they are not living by example, the cost of governance is still going high, then it's a very serious cause of worry for us citizens, because we need to see the government work what they say. And for us, as a lesson learned, the government should not be reactive. They should be proactive from what they say they want to do. Okay? So now let's look at it in reality. Now, Nigerians have been complaining about income, the purchasing power. Do we have the purchasing power that will enable us fit into the credit scheme that the government wants to implement? If you don't have a source of income, how then do you enroll into a credit scheme? That is one aspect of it. So the government need to learn their lesson by seeing a way of improving employment for all citizens, improving purchasing power. That is on the other hand. Then on the other hand, if government wants to talk about more or less reorientation for everyone, then they should be leading by example. First, the cost of governance must be reduced. Then they should also speak to those in government. How do we award contracts? How do the police attach to politicians? How do they behave with ordinary citizens? All this put together, do they drive against traffic? Do they beat traffic lights? So all this has to do with a lot of reorientation, and we look up to the politicians, we look up to those in the corridors of power to lead by example. Yes, if they do, then ordinary citizens will fall along. So our leadership should be leading by example. So that is what I have to say. And this is very, very critical. if we are determined to move Nigeria to that country that we all want to see. Thank you.
Let's take it to Dr. Olorudami. I know that maybe you have something to say about leadership by example, because that is far and in between for some of the leaders we have in politics. But I want you to help Nigerians prepare for what 2025 is looking like. How should they approach governance and policy from policymakers? So this is what I mean. The president, bold and courageous, he's been given that credit, and you can see he's not shifting ground. He's been very consistent in his posture and positioning. PMS subsidy is gone, and is gone for real. He has maintained that position. There's no subsidy for FX. So we have, because if you look at the MTEF, we can see that 1,500 is maintained. It's going to be maintained for about 5 years, depending on the flexibility of all of that. He has said that there's nothing wrong with his cabinet size, that they are all needed to deliver his renewed hope agenda. Let's go to the governors. The governors are not, some of them, or a lot of them, are not taking their hold of the local government. All of this LG autonomy, we're still looking at it with suspicion. The State Assembly is still within their chokehold. The State Independent Electoral Commission is still within their chokehold. So I just painted a picture of the people at the top. What should the people at the bottom, how should they respond to this reality that we're faced with? Because that is the reality.
Jeff, you have given me such a marginal, very wide marginal scope to cover within short frame of time, but I would take top and bottom as my reference point at this attempt. You see, Nigerians have a very, very positive attitude, and we have over time survived anything. I have always maintained that there's nothing Nigerians cannot survive. However, it does appear as though the political elites also know this, and so there is absolutely nothing they cannot do, no matter how stupidly sounding it hits the ears. People go and do and say anything because they know they will get away with it. You see people go to the court in crutches, knowing they don't have any form of ailment, and Nigerians say nothing about it. And you see snakes swallowing billions of naira, and they announce it, and Nigerians say nothing about it. However, I feel that the closest form of government to the people is the local government. And if Nigerians ever want to take governance seriously, we need to all move into our local government and start asking questions. What is going on here? What are the funds used for? How much came in? How much went out? And in what directions are this money being spent? Because for me, I think the president's bold move is an advantage for us to also latch onto that transportation and get answers in the direction that we need to get answers. Now, the gap between the intent of this current administration and tangible impact is getting wider by the day. And perhaps that's because it does appear at times as if it's only the president that is really pushing this agenda. I know that will be an unfair statement to those who are also making their efforts count, aviation, immigration, and things like that. But I want to just put it out very strongly that there is a need for a cohesion, a national posturing to the current economic reforms. Getting not just the presidents saying it and making bold, but getting the buy-in of the local, state, and the federal systems to also latch into it. By so doing, posturing very positively that we know what's happening and we are getting onto that train. Everybody is contributing and bringing their value to the table. So Nigeria need to switch their attitude. and start asking that question from the local levels. And as we get into our wards to the local government system, we can start energizing the process. And perhaps a form of awareness about governance is also needed.
Well, perhaps an area that we should also be asking questions would also be financial accountability. You know, during the last administration, a lot was said about how, you know, there were breaches in fiscal responsibility, particularly with the administration obtaining the ways and means. But we've seen in this current administration supplementary budgets obtained in addition to the 2024 budget now, additional supplementary budget, the first being 6.2, and then the one for the FCT obtained 2 times over. In spite of savings made from subsidy removal, which according to the Minister of Finance is to the tune of $20 billion, I believe, if I'm quoting him correctly. So what are your projections, Mr. Edem, now about, you know, the expenditure of this administration and its ability or inability or the lack of it to, you know, be in line with the Fiscal Responsibility Act from what you see in its spendings from 2024 and 2025?
Okay, thank you very much. If you look at the 2025 budget, the 2025 budget is a budget slightly over 49 trillion naira. This is all-time high so far in the history of Nigeria. And then looking at this budget and then putting it side by side with the current, the budget of 2024, and you also see that there have been a lot of, I just want to mind my language, there are a lot of budget lines that ordinarily shouldn't consume that amount of money. So in terms of budgeting, we have heard several stories about budget padding and a whole lot of story about it. But I also feel that the budget should come from the bottom to the top. There should be a process whereby the citizens fit into the budget. And that way it will make the budget to be very, very realistic. Now, looking at these budget lines, especially for some of the budget categories, we see that some of the budget lines seems to be repeated. Okay, we have although there are some budget lines that seem similar, let me just say so, but they seem to be repeated. So we need to take a critical look, because if you look at this in a layman eyes, it looks very okay. Looking at the capital expenditures and the supplementary that is being proposed, it looks okay, because it also lay emphasis on infrastructures and all that. But there are a lot of repeated budget lines which we feel should be streamlined to enable us feel the impact of this budget. And then looking at what is also the current reality, that the budget of 2024, because of the supplementary, will also extend into 2025. In terms of fiscal accountability, this is not very okay. We should have a budget calendar that we stick to. And even when we cannot finish that expenditure, then because we operate a medium-term expenditure framework, which expands into three years, which is the minimum framework for that expenditure, we should be able to carry whatever has not been spent for a particular fiscal year of that particular budget into the next one. So not by extending the 2024 budget. I hope we all know that the 2024 budget of the federal government is going to be extended into 2025. This is not very good in my own calculation, because once we start this process this way, we are now going to set a standard, because it therefore means that with the budget of 49.7 trillion, that money will not also be expended in total in 2025. And therefore, maybe a supplementary budget also will come forward to add to the 49.7, and then to also be extended to 2026, which is not a very good practice, if you ask me.
So as we wind down now, let me go to Dr. Olorundami, and I'd like to refer to the President's New Year's statement yet again, because that really sets the tone. Yes, he met with the governors yesterday. He essentially told them to also key into what the central government is doing, saying, hey, we're not taking local governments from you. But governance at all levels is key to whatever outcomes we'll get in 2025, starting, of course, with the federal or central government now, as the president described it in his statement. And I know that the president, in that same statement, talked about a section of the population that are tainted, that see things through the prisms of politics, ethnicity, region, and religion, asking Nigerians not to get distracted by those segment or that segment of a small population of Nigeria. But what's the point here? It is clear that things are not how they ought to be. Well, it looks like the president agrees, but the question is, how fast can we begin to turn the tides? Some have thought or said that 2025 may even be worse than 2024. So if you were to give the president a to-do list, by extension the governors, what would that to-do list look like? Maybe the first 5 items for 2025.
Well, let me use this time wisely to advise the president. Well, number one will be fiscal intelligence. And I mean, research and development. Let research go before development. Don't budget until you know who you are budgeting for, what you're budgeting for, and how it will be achieved. We need that more than ever. And I'm saying this with every sense of responsibility. My call as a citizen of Nigeria. From the local levels right to the state and to the top at the federal, we need to understand this very basic economic principle. Who are you budgeting for? What are your plans? How much do you have? And how do you achieve? So we can see what is being achieved on the go. A strategic development plan will be useful from all levels, local and right up to the federal. 2, the confab that you referred to, I'm hoping it's not going to be another jamboree. So I'm going to advise the president to ensure that across all strata of society, across all strata of youth engagements in Nigeria, don't make it a show for the educated Nigerians or for the Nigerians in entertainment. Make it an all-inclusive, confab, where frank and very cogent, discussions can hold. And I will also want to add that a value-based, discussion where youth engagement based on value creation and national development is engaged with. 3, security and stability. We're still having a lot of kidnapping going on in Nigeria. And just before Christmas, or maybe after Christmas, a friend of mine's wife was kidnapped in Abuja. We need to address that. We need to address it. For infrastructural development, I see what the Minister of Aviation has done at the airport. I give him kudos for that. We'd like to see that type of innovation done across all ministries, agencies. We should take advantage of digital transformation to enhance efficiency and speed of delivering governance in Nigeria. And finally, I will advise the president to understand that the infrastructure for his current economic reforms are not particularly there. So it does not matter how fast, how ambitious he wants to be, he needs to take it slowly. Incremental economic reforms will yield better results. 1 year, 7 months, we're taking a lot of blows. 2024 seemed like we'll just come out of a very turbulent flight, and we are still scampering to balance out of that experience. The president should take it easy and get some intelligence from the populace, especially from the local level. There are a lot of broken systems, and these reforms will be sitting on them.
Yeah.
It won't hold. It won't hold, except there's some kind of remediation.
Well, I must say you succeeded in your cautious counsel, done in about 3 minutes, Dr. Olorundami. We must anchor this conversation at this point, but it's by no means the end of it as it continues on all other platforms. And if we have time, of course, we'll be reviewing it yet again. But thank you so much for your insights, gentlemen. We've been talking with Mr. Edem, who is the founder, Green Code National Coordinator, Head Green Code Mentoring Hub, and Observer Representative for Africa and Middle East for Climate Investment Fund of the World Bank. Mr. Edem joined us from the United States of America. We've also been talking with Dr. Tokunbo Olorundami, lecturer at the School of Humanities, York, St. John's University, United Kingdom. He's also a public affairs analyst. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And from here, we move on to something equally important, as important as accountability and all other issues in that space. But it has got to do with your health. What will it look like in 2025? Join us for that conversation after this time out.